Welcome to the panel room. Today we're discussing tie-in novels. But before we start, let's go around the room and have everyone introduce themselves. And we'll start with Alex.
Hi, I'm Alex White. I wrote the Salvagers trilogy, which starts with A Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe. I also write tie-in novels for Alien. I've written two. My second one comes out in February. And Star Trek now, which is amazing. I'm totally excited about that. So that's what I do, and that's where you can find my books, and at Alex R. White if you want to follow me on Twitter.
Great. Janine?
Hi, I'm Janine Spendlove, and I've written various fiction and nonfiction type things. The reason I'm on here is I wrote a tie-in short story in the Star Wars universe. And I guess in my day job, I'm a United States Marine. Yay.
All right. Aaron.
Hi, I'm Aaron Rosenberg. I'm a novelist, children's book author, and game designer. I've written or been in over 200 books, including about 40 novels, and probably about half of those are tie-in properties.
Perfect. Jean?
I've written about 40 novels too. I'm Jean Rabe. About half of my books have been tie-in projects. Game Worlds, Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, Shadowrun. That's me.
All right.
Pretty plain and simple.
All right. Diana.
I'm Diana Peterfreund. Most of my books are not tie-in novels, but the ones that are, I'm currently writing a young adult mystery series based on the board game Clue.
Oh, cool. And Chris?
Chris A. Jackson. I've got about 30 novels under my belt, about 10-ish novels and novellas in tie-in properties, a lot of game tie-in stuff, but I've also written some tie-in stuff for IPs that aren't game related. I won a Scribe Award for a short story last year for a tie-in that it's kind of like James Bond meets Cthulhu. So fun stuff. It's with Red Hat Productions, and it's British spyish, thievish kind of stuff. But I'm having a lot of fun doing it, and just signed with a new property with another publisher that's going to be tie-in as well. So I do Shadowrun, Pathfinder Tales, Iron Kingdoms, and other gaming properties, but a lot of other stuff that's not tie-in related as well.
Okay, perfect. Clay, Susan?
I'm Susan Griffith, one half of the Clay and Susan Griffith writing team. We started out in media tie-ins, writing comic books like The Tick, some Disney comic books, Man-Eating Cow, and have graduated to, I'll let you go ahead.
I thought we were just doing one at a time.
Well,
we've already broken our rule. The most recent tie-in we did was tie-in novels with the Flash and Arrow TV show. So that's us.
Right. Perfect. And finally, Keith.
I am Keith DeCandido. I have written a ridiculous amount of fiction, or an amount of ridiculous fiction, depending on which Amazon reviews you read. I also got started doing media tie-ins, both as an editor and as a writer. I edited a series of Marvel Comics-based novels in the 1990s for Byron Price and Berkeley Books, back when Berkeley Books was owned like 3 corporate mergers ago. And I've written in about 35 different licensed universes at this point, from Alien to Zorro. In fact, Alien was one of the more recent ones. I did an Alien novel also called Alien Isolation. I've done Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Star Trek, Supernatural, Farscape, Dungeons and Dragons, Serenity, bunch of others, Sleepy Hollow, Orphan Black, Resident Evil, and a lot of others that I can't keep track of because I'm old and feeble. But and I also was given a Lifetime Achievement Award by the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers, which means I never need to achieve anything ever again. That's handy. My most recent stuff is the Alien novel Isolation, and I also did some work for Star Trek Adventures for the role-playing game, their Klingon Empire core supplement. And I've got another project that I can't talk about yet because I signed an NDA, and I'm sure we will talk about NDAs a lot during this panel. Oh, yeah. But it's a really cool tie-in project that should come out in 2021. I'm really looking forward to it.
All right, perfect. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I'll start with you, Janine. just tell us a little about your first experience with a tie-in novel. How did you get in? Did they approach you? Did you approach them?
Okay, so it wasn't a novel. It was just a short story. I'm not even remotely as qualified as everybody else here. It was just the tie-in short story for Star Wars. It was titled In Brief. They came to me. They had they contacted me. They had a character that they wanted me to write a backstory for as part of their whole Battlefront video game release and also The Force Awakens. So it was the last short story they were going to release before The Force Awakens came out via the Insider. And so it was actually really, I'll admit, when I got the email, I had just gotten in from a flight because that's what I do in the Marine Corps. And so I just landed, come inside, and was getting ready to debrief with my crew, and pulled out my phone and checked my emails, and just saw this like random one where the title was, Star Wars. I saw Star Wars in the title. And I was like, I don't know who these people are. And I clicked on it, and it was like, hey, Janine, we got your name from our editor, and would you be interested? And like, I just sat on the stairs and just started like crying, because like this was my dream. Like, this is all I ever.
That's what everyone wants. Everyone wants a Star Wars.
That's all I wanted. It's like, exactly. I was like, I don't care if I ever write anything else again. This is all I've ever wanted, is to create in this universe and add to this universe's canon. So, and that's one of the things, because that's a question I get asked a lot by people is, oh, how did you get Star Wars to notice you? How did you get them to take you? Did you submit? And I was like, no. You don't go to them, they come to you. And it was honestly, it was a confluence of events. I was very, very fortunate in that I had a lot of friends in the industry, I mean, every person here on this screen that I know is somebody who has taken me under their wing and imparted great advice to me, and has, like, Jean definitely nurtured me very, early on. Diana, like one of my first conventions ever. And I remember when I went to Diana, when I had met this Star Wars editor, and I said, what do I do? Like, I gave her one of my books, but what do I do? Do I like follow up? Do I email her? Do I Facebook message her? I don't know what to do. And Diana gave me really great advice. And and I thought nothing of it. And then months later, out of the blue, I get this email. So it was, and I'd had a friend who is a Star Wars author, John Jackson. And he introduced me to his editor, and so had that not happened, like, it just never would have happened. And it's also a little bit of luck too, because they specifically were looking for somebody who was active duty in the military. They thought it would, I think, be great as kind of, well, I don't know if that's what they're looking for, but that is definitely how they promoted it. Is like, hey, when you want somebody to write real combat in Star Wars, who do you bring? You send in the Marines, is kind of how they ended up promoting it. So they're going to try to get at it from all angles. And so, again, it was just lucky, and I had a great time. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, definitely. Aaron, how about you?
Requires me to unmute. My first tie-in novel was actually Star Trek. So back in 2001, but I'd been doing role-playing games for probably 10 years before that. I've written a bunch of role-playing tie-in properties and things like that. But the novel came about, actually, like Janine said, it often has to do with how you meet people and things like that. I had recently moved to New York. One of the people that I knew actually was a fellow alum from University of Kansas named John Nordover, who was one of the senior editors on the Star Trek line. And John and I had known each other for years and years. We'd been in classes together back at KU and things like that. And he wasn't interested in having me write a Star Trek novel because I'd never written a full-length novel before. I'd done tons and tons of RPG work, all kinds of short stories, but no full-length novels. And he said, write a full-length novel, and then we'll see. And then another friend of ours mentioned to me a short time later, there's a new line coming up, a new Star Trek line called Star Trek SCE. And, that you might be able to get in on if you're interested in it. I was like, all right, so what is that exactly? And they said, well, it's kind of like Star Trek CSI in a way. And I said, ooh, so like Star Trek with like mysteries and police procedurals and things, sign me up. And so that's how I got started with it. I wrote a book called The Riddled Post, And Keith, I can't remember if you became my editor in the middle of that or on the next one I did.
No, I was your editor on that one.
You were my editor, yeah, because by that point, John.
Yeah, that was my series. That was my project. So yeah.
Yeah. So that's how I got started on it.
Perfect.
And amazingly, we're still speaking to each other.
I know, right? Several books later,
Yeah.
many years.
All right, Jean, how about you?
My first tie-in novel was for Forgotten Realms Red Magic, and that goes all the way back to 1992. Until I've got some age to me. And back in those days, TSR would allow you to audition for novels. They were using authors that had several credits, but every year they would leave a book or two open and you could submit a proposal for it. And I'm a very persistent soul. And it took me several auditions, but I finally landed one. And I did so after I heard a couple of editors talking. They were complaining that the submissions they were getting did not hit all of their senses. And one editor says, if they don't hit all my senses in the first 5 pages, I put the manuscript aside and they don't read any farther. And I thought, well, heck. So I went back to my submission and I hit all 5 senses within the first 5 pages. And I finally got a book accepted.
All right.
The
Perfect.
lesson we learned from this is pay attention to your editor.
Yes.
They don't ask for things that they don't want, right?
No, and then after that, I went to Dragonlance, and after TSR, I went to Shadowrun, and I even got to go to the Twilight Zone. So it's been fun.
Cool. Diana.
You're muted.
My first tie-in was actually 10 years ago. I did a novelization of a comedy film called Morning Glory, which starred Harrison Ford and Rachel McAdams. And my editor at Random House, I'd been doing chick lit novels for her. And she was like, I think this would be a good fit for you. Let's do it. And I did it and I had a lot of fun and I loved doing it. And then I didn't do another one until my new series, the Clue series. And what's really interesting to me is that, back in 2010, I joined the International Association of Media Tie-in Writers, and I did all of that. And tie-in was not really something that was on the radar of most romance authors, chick lit authors, or YA authors, which, sort of the world that I was living in. I wasn't really living in the sort of the science fiction and fantasy world. And it wasn't really something that was done. And so to do it again now in 2019 and 2020, which is when In the Hall with the Knife and In the Study with the Wrench came out, and just to see the explosion in the last decade of tie-ins and licensed work in the children's field and in the YA field. You see so many more Star Wars, you see so many more Marvel properties, DC properties. Everybody in the children's lit field is sort of getting into tie-in work, which is something that you didn't really see 10 years ago. I would tell my friends that I was doing this novelization, and they were like, why would you do that? Why is that a thing? That's not a thing. And now it's like, oh, really? You did this? You got a novelization? You got a Star Wars? You got, so I was so excited. And my agent came to me and she goes, do you like Clue? And I was like, I can recite the entire 80s movie. And I played that game when I was growing up, like, please let me do this. And so I auditioned for it. And it was one of those things, like, when I turned in the audition, I was like, I nailed this. Like, if they have ever seen this movie, they will hire me. And, so I was right. They hired me. And they just let me kind of go to town with it. They said, what we're looking for is we want to do to Clue what Riverdale did to Archie Comics. Like, we want the Clue version of Riverdale. We want it to be dark and edgy and modern. And I was like, gotcha, like, let's do this thing. So here we are.
Right. Perfect. Chris, about your first time?
My first time. You mean my first tie-in novel?
Yes.
So I had this whole thing planned, and it's actually one of the things that I had planned that panned out. I had been a gamer for decades and really enjoyed the Pathfinder role-playing game. And I'd been doing a lot of conventions. I'd gone to a couple of Gen Cons, and I knew that every year Paizo had a huge presence at Gen Con, and I knew that they just started a line of novels, the Pathfinder Tales, and I'd read every single one of them, of course, and I knew I had met the editor for the line, Sutter, James Sutter. And so one year at Gen Con, I screwed up my courage and walked up to him after a panel. The panel was appropriately named, "So you want to write for Paizo?" And I said, I introduced myself and I said, "Hey, you're doing the Pathfinder Tales and I love the novels, and you've got all this water on your map and you're not doing any pirate stories, and I'm your pirate guy. I just came off a 4-book series with a small press that won some awards, and I can write pirate fiction. So let me pitch to you." And James said, "Well, send me a writing sample." So I sent him my best, couple of chapters from this other series, the Scimitar Seas novel with Dragon Moon Press that won me some awards. And
I did those covers,
of course. And we were actually in the Caribbean on my boat when I got the email. It was like the first of the year, and I have absolutely no doubt that James was cleaning out his email bin and found my email with the writing samples, and he said, "Write me some short fiction for the web fiction. We'll see how it goes." And I gave him what he wanted. I gave it to him fast. I gave it to him clean. And then lightning struck, and somebody fell out of their novel schedule. They promised them a novel and they couldn't deliver. And he said, "Look, if you can get me a novel in 5 months, it's yours." And I said, "Yeah, okay, I can do that. Not a problem at all." And then I squeed really, really loud and wrote a novel in a month.
Month seems very leisurely to me.
Yeah, well, no.
Yeah, that's an eternity, man.
Keith and I are sitting here going, "Wait, how many novels can we do in that time? Hang on."
Well, yeah, but I wrote the novel in a month.
That's good.
But it was dirty, and it took a couple more months to clean it up. But and that's kind of why my editors with Tie-In like me, is they don't have to bleed through their eyes to read my work, right? That, and I write what they want. I have zero ego, so it's like, just tell me what you want. Don't worry about bruising me. You're not going to. I have a really thick skin. Just tell me what you want. So it worked nicely. And got 3 novels out with them. A couple more still kind of lurking in the shadows. And then every year at Gen Con, it's like somebody comes up to me, "Hey, you want to write for this? You want to write for that?" It's amazing once you get your name out there. Especially big cons like Gen Con, it's a target-rich environment. And I even wrote my first horror novella with Arkham Horror that I really enjoyed with Fantasy Flight Games. And it's just one thing and then another. And with IAMTW, I got some work for them writing Traveler, a game I played in college that long ago. But it's just too much fun. I just love it.
Perfect. Clay or Susan?
Our story is kind of similar. We published a few things, small things on our own, tried to meet people, tried to make connections. The thing that sort of ties in all of our early tie-in stuff, whether it's comics or we did some middle grade TV novelizations, we would submit our stuff to editors, to publishers, and or agents or whoever, and they would call and say, "We don't want to do your stuff. Would you be interested in doing our stuff?" Because they saw that we could do it, but they didn't want that. They had needs, and so we'd say, "Yes, that would be great." And we did the Tick middle grade novelizations of the old cartoon show. That's kind of how we got the Flash and Arrow too, through personal connections, not pitching immediately. This is Susan's big thing that she always drums into me. Build a personal relationship with people in the business, with editors, get to know them, go to conventions, just be friendly, don't always pitch. Don't hit them with your business card or your sample the minute you meet them. Sometimes it can take a year or two, but eventually, if you've got other things published, if you can show you have the chops, they'll come to you when they need something. And we've also turned things down. We've had editors ask us to do things, and we've said, I don't think we're right for that. You can find someone better. Now, if you can't, come back and we'll do it. But that's not our wheelhouse. And I think they appreciated that, and they came back to us later with other things. So,
Perfect. Keith.
My story is pretty much non-replicable, which I always love telling people when they ask me how I got started. I got started as an editor, actually. Like I mentioned, I was editing a series of Marvel comics-based novels and short stories. We did about 54 books between 1994 and 2000, and we led off with 2 Spider-Man titles: a Spider-Man novel called The Venom Factor by Diane Duane, and an anthology called The Ultimate Spider-Man. This was in 1994, 6 years before Marvel did their Ultimate line. And I put it together with my co-editor at the time, John Betancourt. And we had stories for all the villains who were on the cover of the book, except for Venom. The cover was done like way before we even started the thing. And we needed a Venom story. We had submitted 6 different Venom stories by 6 different authors to Marvel. Marvel had rejected every single one of them. So we went to that. We're past the 11th hour at this point, and we asked them, what do you want to see in a Venom story? They gave us a sentence. Armed only with this sentence, John and I wrote the story in about 2 days because we didn't have time to assign it to anybody else. Like the book was due to be printed, or to be produced anyway. And so I did a draft of the story, gave it to John. John tore it apart, rewrote it from the ground up, gave it back to me. I tore it apart, rewrote it from the ground up, gave it back to him. And that was how I got started writing tie-ins to make the cover work. That led to other work, and working as an editor, I was working with a lot of writers who were also putting together other projects. So I got to write a Doctor Who story because the anthology was being edited by somebody from whom I had bought an X-Men story for one of our anthologies, and a couple of others as well. So, and what Chris had said is absolutely true. These things tend to snowball. Once you start selling things, and in particular with tie-in work, once you start establishing that you can hit deadlines, and that you can match the style of whatever it is you're tying into, that it fits the voice of the property, then you will get more work because that's a valuable skill, and that's not a skill everyone has. There are certain licenses that have trouble finding people to write for them, or certain authors who can't write for certain ones, including, I've had the issue myself. So that's a valuable skill. So it just kind of snowballed down the hill, and then eventually, here I am now.
All right. Alex, finally.
Well, I fucking bowed and scraped is what I did. I got an agent after like many years of submitting novels to various agencies, and my agent set up a meeting with the editor of Titan, who did Alien, the publicist from my debut, which came out with like a kind of a mid-list press, Solaris, if anybody's heard of them. Anyway, that publicist had moved over to Titan Books, and she said, if you ever want me to send you any books, I love your work, please let me know. And I looked and I was like, oh, you guys do Aliens novels? Like, how do I get in on that? So my agent set up a play date with the editor, and I was 3 sheets to the wind drunk the first night of Dragon Con, and Steve moved up the meeting by 2 days, and he was like, I need to meet you now instead. Can I hear your pitch? And I'm like, sure. Like, so I had 3 pitches that I had memorized. I mean, like, I've done lines drunk before. I'm in theater. I've done theater. So like, yeah, so I did, I had my pitches memorized and in realtor order, which is second best, worst, best. So you take them through a little journey of, oh, I like this, but I'm not sure about it, to, oh, maybe this person's not the one for the job, to, wait, no, that's really good. That's genius. I love it. Right? Like, that's the goal anyway. It seemed to work. I'm not gonna say that it would work every time, but I do help my agent sell some books. So.
All right, perfect. So my next question, you could take a lot of different ways. I'll start with you, Aaron. How do you tackle the challenge of a tie-in property? We've already heard, NDAs. We've got canon. You've got characters that people love or hate or love to hate. How do you just get into all of that and, thread the needle, I guess?
Well, so for me, the most important things are, a couple people have already said, what do you want? Which is crucial. But the other really important side of it is getting the voice right. That may mean as specific as getting the voices of the characters if you're doing established characters, or it may mean getting the voice of the world, getting the voice of the IP in general. But just, it obviously really, really helps if you're already a big fan of whatever property it is. I've been lucky enough to work on some properties that I love, things like X-Files and Eureka and, Star Trek and a bunch of others, but if you don't already know, especially whatever aspect of it they want you to tackle, you need to learn it. You need to really sit down and pour yourself into it and immerse yourself so that when you start writing it, you are living it and breathing it. Because, for me, that's the thing that, not so much the editors, but really the licensors and the readers are really going to notice, is whether you really love this or not. If you don't, you can fake it to a degree, but you can only fake it so far. But you have to find something in it that you love and that speaks to you, and let it speak, and really try to be authentic with it in terms of what it is.
Is there a difference when you're working on, say, based on TV series or movie, or based off of a role-playing game or video game?
Well, it's a lot easier, working on like a TV show. I mean, I did 2 Eureka novels, and the beautiful thing about those is I had 3-4 seasons of Eureka to consult, and I was already a huge fan of the show, so I knew the voices of the characters. Like, I knew not only what they looked like, I knew who they were, I knew how they moved, what they said, I knew what their idiosyncrasies were, what their vocal tics, their facial tics. I knew all these things about them that I could then put into the book. And that's an amazing resource to have, because as long as you can hear it, as long as you can refer back to it, and you can make sure that your things match up to that, if you nail it, it's phenomenal. I mean, the greatest thing for a tie-in writer is having people come up to you and say, this was just like watching an episode, or just like watching another movie. I heard these guys.
All right, perfect. Gene, how about you? Still on mute.
I worked on both. I found that I have a lot more freedom when I'm working on a game product, especially because the game manufacturers, which I've done novels for, don't want you to use the main characters, or if you use them, only use them tangentially, not as a star. That's let me develop my own characters and my own villains and my own creatures. So it gives me it lets my sandbox be a lot larger. And that's what I've liked about that. If I had to pick a media property or a game property, I would pick the game property.
Okay, and how were they with you adding something that would then become canon? Are they okay with it, or?
They've always been okay with it, and usually they would turn around and take some cool thing that I'd put in the book and turn around and make it part of the game material. So it's kind of like, I thought that was just kind of neat. Some of my magical spells or magical effects, especially with the dragons, transcended into the game material. I really like to play with dragons.
All right, perfect. Diana, how about you?
Well, I think Clue is a slightly different property because there isn't like a canon. There's every 10 years or so, they rewrite the backstories of the characters of Clue. There's, so many different versions of the game. There's like a VHS version of the game from the 80s. There's like a version of the game that has different, every time they remake the game. And do a new version. There's the movie version, etc. The biggest thing I've noticed is since the books came out, I wrote the books based on the versions of the characters that are in the game that you can go buy in a store now. And I think a lot of people maybe who've read the books, like they have an older version of the game in their personal game closet. And so like, did you come up with Orchid? Is she a character you created? And I'm like, no, actually, if you buy the game right now, Orchid is one of the little 6 people that you can get. Mrs. White has been retired and Dr. Orchid is one of the characters now. So I tried to bring in some of the retired characters. No one's ever retired in Clue. It's like no one's ever dead in comics, right? Like you just bring them back, right? So but if you go to a store right now and buy Clue, like what you're gonna get is Orchid, Peacock, Mustard, Green, Plum, and Scarlet. So you're not gonna get maybe some of the other characters that might have appeared in the past. So I bring them in as side characters. But it's other than that, they just kind of let me do what I want to because I was already making teenagers, so I could make them be whatever they were going to be. I mean, I just tried to stick to kind of our idea. So like obviously Colonel Mustard is not a colonel because he's 16, but I made him like a transfer from a military school, that kind of thing.
All right, perfect. Chris.
I think what Erin said is really key. First, you have to kind of sit down with your editor and hope that you click. Nothing is more painful than working with an editor you don't click with, that you don't understand what they want and they don't really like. They can't put their finger on what you're not doing correctly or by their terms correctly. But I've been super blessed with, for the most part, clicking with my editors. What I really love though is I'm a character writer. If you've read my novels, you know I'm a character writer. So what I really dearly love is taking an iconic character or one of the characters that's already been written about and just breathing a little bit more, I don't want to say life because other writers have done wonderfully with them, but a different aspect, maybe a little bit different backstory, maybe a little bit more emotion, maybe a little bit, more angst or pain. And I find that that is received well. So just because, and what's really key if you're writing something that is an iconic character or a character that has been written before is tell your editor, okay, I need everything that's ever been written about that character. Even if it was just, if he was in the room, I need to read it so that you're not gonna, stick your hand in a fan blade or something like that. Just, you need to do it right. You need to know what's already been written so you're not going to, trip over your own feet. But getting that character's voice right, like Erin said, the character's voice, and if it's a game or a TV series, that voice as well, that environment. So, but I've had a lot of luck doing it, and yeah, it's all about the characters for me. And playing in somebody else's sandbox is so much fun. So.
And what do you do in the case where you do have an issue with an editor not clicking?
Try to work through it. I have bailed before. On projects before. I got pitched for a huge gaming property, and initially I thought this is great, but then I started looking at the game and looking at the characters and looking at some of the fiction written in it, and it would have been 6 months assimilation to get to a point where I felt like I could write something in that world, and I was already busy, and so I finally just said, look, let's pull the pin on this because we're not meshing and this is a huge amount of work for me. And when it all boils down to it, it's not going to be much of a paycheck. So, I think there's plenty of writers out there that, in fact, I pitched 2 writers, I bailed and said, but this is the guy you need to talk to because he is a mega fan of this property and he's a really good writer. So I hope they signed him, but I got no follow-up on that.
and obviously it didn't hurt your career at all.
Not in the slightest. In fact, I think editors appreciate the honesty. If you feel like you can't do something justice or you're not meshing properly, it's best to just bring it out into the open. That's the elephant in the room. You just need to say, look, this isn't working. but here's somebody who can probably do it better than I can. That's
It's
always
not you,
very
it's
much
me.
appreciated. Yeah, Alex can do that.
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah, what Chris and Aaron are saying about being a fan of the work is just, it's so all important, because I really think that, the readers for tie-in works are fans, and they can smell contempt from, or ignorance miles away, sharks.
I've also been pitched on projects that I didn't even know existed. But once I picked it up, okay, I'm interested, send me all the stuff that's been written and I read it. Now I'm a fan, or I'm not, and there's somebody else that can do that for you.
Exactly. All right, Susan.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's has hit the nail on the head with that. For us, or at least for me, I'm incredibly character driven. So on most of these properties that come through, I'm always, when we did the Flash and Arrow series, I was a huge Arrow fan already. I was already a huge Flash fan. Clay was even more of a Flash fan than I was at that point. So we were able to bring that whole dynamic between the two, which doesn't get into play much. We did like crossover, it was a crossover event, and the fans loved that. We knew what the fans liked, because we were fans. So anytime you can hit the nail for the fan, and it makes those characters come alive. I mean, we've worked for a lot of different ones. I worked for Disney, who I was a huge Disney fan when I was starting back in 1996, whenever we started working on the Acclaim stuff. And it was all about the characters. It was making sure we had those voices right, because if you are even slightly wrong, Disney called us out on a couple of, that's not what Bill would say. I'm like, oh, I was surprised. But that's what they want. They know their characters, and you have to know them too. And that's what makes, those stories come alive for your fans. And that's who you're ultimately writing for. As much as I like to think that we're writing for us, because we're fans, but you have to make sure you're hitting for the fans as well. And so we enjoy always doing it. Clay's much of a world guy, but he has his favorite characters. We've done work for Kolchak. His Kolchak stuff is phenomenal, because he went straight to the heart of the character. The world didn't need as much building. That's what that's why you have that ready-made world for you. Even with gaming, we did Pinnacle, and though we worked with new characters, still the world is a character, like everyone's been saying, and you've got to make sure you hit those notes that people can recognize it, that people are going to go, oh my God, I love that concept that you're bringing out. So
now, working on a series was at the time running, because I know Arrow's finished since then, did you run into any issues between continuity of your book and the show?
Yeah, we did. They had, there were several. They didn't have a show Bible to give us. No. So we were actually going through the show on Netflix or wherever it was, and trying to see things, because they couldn't tell us what the name of certain things were. Or
they had a map on the TV.
Yeah, Barry had a map in the wall on his board in his lab, and we had to freeze it to see the names of the places in the city, because either they didn't know or wouldn't bother to tell us. I don't know which. It didn't matter. But and we would pitch ideas, or even write chapters, and they would come back and go, you can't use. We were going to finish the Arrow book in the Queen Mansion, and our contact came back and said, "Oh, you can't use that because it burned down." And we're thinking, no, it didn't. That never burned down. He said, "Oh no, in one of the connected comic book series we did, it burned down," which we hadn't read it. They didn't send us anything. We didn't know. So we said, okay, we'll change it. It worked out better anyway. It was a better story. But yeah, so luckily we had a good person in production who would answer questions as we went along. We didn't write the whole thing and then have to go back and rewrite it. So that was a plus.
All right, perfect.
Keith, wait a minute. I had to rewrite something. I was enjoying your story about Arrow. I like to kill characters. And
Oh,
in
no.
my in my first big Dragonlance trilogy, I called Margaret Weiss and I said, "Can I kill Gold Moon?" And Gold Moon was one of the big Dragonlance heroes. And she said, "Absolutely, Gold Moon's got to be 90 years old. She can die." So I went to the games department and I said, "It's okay, I can kill Gold Moon, right?" Sure. So I write this wonderful death scene where she gets speared in the gut by a lance. And she's dead. She's really dead. She is so dead. She's not going to come back from being dead. And the book gets published. Then the game department comes to me and says, "Jean, we need Gold Moon. We're going to put her in a couple of game products." And I said, "You can't. She's really, really dead. Really, really, really dead. Margaret said I could kill her. You said I could kill her. She's dead. Well, she's not dead anymore. You have to find a way to bring her back." So in the next book, I had to have her resurrected so the game people can continue to use it. And oh my gosh, I got horrible emails from people saying, "How fakey was it that I brought Gold Moon back?" And I was just like crushed. I thought she really was dead.
I really meant for it to stick. Yes.
You'll always be dead to me.
Look at Rise of Skywalker. No one's ever dead.
Yeah.
Money brings back anybody.
All right, Keith.
Fiction, anyhow.
Yeah.
I everybody pretty much covered most of it, so there's not much left for me to say on the subject, but I want to emphasize something Diana mentioned briefly, which is that you have to take the world seriously. There have been instances where I have worked on a property that I was not necessarily a huge fan of. There were several that I hadn't heard of before I was brought into it, but became a fan of it while doing the research. And the research is critical. You have to, like Aaron said at the very beginning, you have to immerse yourself in the property because that's part of the fun anyway. But you have to, get the character voices in your head. Sometimes you have to freeze frame it so you can look at the map. And you want to be able to, see how the characters interact with each other, how they speak, what their vocal intonations are. That's all really important. There was a novella I wrote in the Star Trek universe that teamed Picard and Sisko up because tie-in fiction doesn't care about actor availability. So we could do stuff like that. And there was a line of dialogue that I had originally given to Picard, and I realized, no, Sisko has to be the one to say this thing. And I completely rewrote the entire sentence because Patrick Stewart doesn't talk the same way Avery Brooks does. And you have to be aware of stuff like that. But you also have to have, even if you don't necessarily have affection for it, if it's not necessarily your favorite thing, you have to take it seriously. You have to believe in the world as it's presented, even if it doesn't make sense to you. I got a really hard lesson in that when I did a CSI New York book. I am a police procedural junkie. I write police procedurals. A lot of my original fiction and some of my tie-in fiction are police procedurals. CSI makes my brain hurt because it is so completely not how crime labs work. It is not how police procedures work. But that's what the TV show was. So for the purpose of that book, I had to shut that part of my brain off and treat the NYPD the way CSI New York treats it, not the way the NYPD really is. And that's an important thing to be able to do, to be able to completely put yourself into that world and take that world seriously and believe that world and make the reader believe that that world is the same one that they're watching on TV every week or that they've seen the movie of or that they play the game of.
Because I think with the tie-in fiction, more than the other kinds of fiction, you are writing to established fans. And so, I think that there is something to be said, like when I was talking about how in the last decade in young adult fiction, you've really seen tie-in come up. I think it's because it's sort of like the apotheosis of the fanfic world, right? Like it's so, it's so pervasive now that everyone's just like, well, you're writing to the fans and this is what you're doing. And that is kind of understood in a way that it maybe wasn't earlier. And so I think if you don't respect the work, like Keith said, even if it's not, like something that you were a fan of originally, because you are writing to people who do truly love it. And otherwise, what's the point, right?
Now, Keith, you mentioned earlier NDA.
Yeah.
It seems kind of strange when you look at other fiction that you would have to not talk about something. So tell us a little about why an NDA is required in this type of.
Well, there's two reasons. One is just the general control of information that Hollywood in particular is obsessive about, particularly in the last 20 years or so. That they don't want information about a project to come out any sooner than is necessary. And especially, given the number of news sources out there, and the number of people who want to know things, and also how spoiler phobic people are, I understand the need to control information up to a certain point. Also, a lot of times it's you'll be in, like in the case of the NDA I am currently suffering under. The project is one that has only just barely been announced. There's not much information out in the world about this project yet. And the fact that there will be tie-ins to it hasn't been announced yet. So, and the work I'm doing is only at the very preliminary stages. They don't want to announce it until it's ready, until it's much farther along in the process, which only makes sense. You don't want to announce something because there's so many different ways that a project can get screwed up between the concept and when it's all written, that you don't want to announce something prematurely. Although some of the NDAs do get ridiculous. I did a Star Trek book called The Klingon Art of War. I signed both the contract and the NDA. The contract was 4 pages long. The NDA was 12 pages long, which is ridiculous. But like it's mostly about the control of information in an age when everybody talks about everything online already anyhow.
All right, thank you for that. Alex, what about you?
How do I tackle the challenge of a tie-in? Is that the question still?
Yes. All of the challenges that come with tie-in.
Well, I mean, for my perspective, the biggest challenge is just story development. I want to make sure that I write something that's in conversation with the original works, that assumes that you've seen the original works and expect as table stakes the tricks from the original works, but require me to do something that hasn't been done normally. And so the first two things that I look for really are, I want to know how I can create a character that will make such an impact on the fandom that they'll demand it on the show. And then I want to know how I can write as walled off an area as I possibly can from the main plot line so that I can do anything I want to. I don't like having to know a lot about other people's characters and the 10,000 novels written about poor Ellen Ripley and the poor Ripleys. I'm sorry. I mean, Keith wrote a good one, but there's a lot of exploit there to cover. And I really have a lot of respect for people who can. And so from my perspective, I like to have a pretty open sandbox to work with. So I'll say, well, this is between these two episodes where these people obviously didn't do anything important. And now I'm going to do something that was life-changing for them, but they don't talk about it much. So, and then as far as the contractual stuff, mostly that's just a question for my agent to kind of get the negotiation as good as he can get it. And NDA wise, I haven't had to sign any of those because I wrote for Alien and Star Trek DS9, both of which have been out for a hot minute, So I don't have to worry about the secrecy stuff. I mean, they'd be mad at me if I spilled something. They'd be real mad, but that's a different story. They'd just be angry. I wouldn't be doomed.
All right, perfect. Janine.
All right. So again, just the one experience of writing tie-in, but it was definitely unique and fun. And I will admit at the beginning, I felt a bit like the whole Gollum Schmeagol conversation, yes, I get to write Star Wars. Oh my gosh, I have to write Star Wars. It's going to be amazing. Oh, I'm going to screw it up somehow and ruin the universe, and I was and then I have to be it's just a short story. It's not a big deal. You can't, how much can you ruin? And yeah, but think about how much you obsessed over the short stories when you were 15. And okay, so there was way more stress than I needed to put myself under, particularly because I was oh, they just I had no idea what the rules were or how they were going to go about it, because this was post them deciding to turn all of the old expanded universe into Legends. So when I first sat down and talked to them, I pitched, so they asked me to pitch them an idea. They told me the character they wanted me to write on, which was a character established by Alexander Freed in his Battlefront novel. And they wanted me to give her the backstory and explain why would this bounty hunter want to join the rebellion. And I was like, oh, well, that's really simple. These are all the reasons why. This is the main reason why I think she would. And so I pitched them this story, and they were like, okay, that's great. We'll clear it with the story group, but you're cleared hot to go write it. And I said, okay, cool. I have some questions though, like, I'm military. What are my left and right lateral limits? You know, I don't want to exceed them. Like Alex was saying, what is my sandbox? And they were like, oh, well, whatever you want it to be. What do you mean, whatever I want it to be? And they said, well, everything got turned into Legends, and there's only, like, aside from, because John Jackson Miller, who had just done his Rebels tie-in, and there were very few things that had been published at this point, other than like the novel, the novelization of the film, and a couple other short stories. This was at the very beginning of kind of, it's not, they don't want it called new canon. There is just canon and there is Legends. So this was the very beginning of canon. And so there were no rules. And I said, well, can I just like make stuff up? And they said, yes, do it. I said, okay, but what if you don't like it? And they said, well, the story group will tell you when something doesn't work. Oh, okay, cool. So it was very liberating, but also kind of like, all right, so what do I take that was in Legends or not? And so I just opted to write a unique, everybody's talked about it. I focused on the story of this character Brand, her backstory, and it was a very unique opportunity I decided I wanted to, I'm half Brazilian. I have a lot of, all my mother's family is from Brazil. I grew up, my first language is Portuguese, so I have a lot of Brazilian culture in my life. And my daughter's Mozambican. And so I very much wanted to try to inject as much of our non-American culture as possible into the story. Additionally, I also wanted to change some or add some things that, because this was going to be a very militaristic story, some things that I don't want to say people do wrong, but just weren't my experience in the military and my experience with combat deployments and things like that. Like, I've literally never seen anybody play poker in any of my deployments, any of my time in my 20 years in the Marine Corps. I'm sure it happens. I've just never seen it. We always play some version of spades, something, something along those lines, whether, and there's a million different variations of that. And so, I was talking to my friend Brian Young. I was like, I want to put this game Spades in there somehow. I got to find a way. And he was like, just call it Lifters. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. So if you read it, Spades is now canon in Star Wars, but it's called Lifters. And I named characters after, because I was like, if I'm only ever writing one Star Wars story, I'm going to name all the characters after friends and family members. And I killed them all off brutally in fights. And because, like Gene, I like to kill people too. And, I'm not going to clarify whether figuratively or literally. No, just kidding. We're talking about storytelling here. So it was a lot of fun in that regard. And one of my mentors, Aaron Alston, had passed away a couple of years prior. And so I named a planet for him because I wanted to canonize him in Star Wars. So it was essentially, I felt like, and this is I don't know if this is gonna sound weird or not, it felt like I was writing Star Wars fan fiction because I've written plenty of fan fiction in various different universes, and I was like, I'm just making stuff up, and it's got Star Wars slapped on it. Like, it's awesome. This is great. And then I turned it in, and the story group looked at it, and they really just came back with a couple like, okay, that we don't think that alien species, because I had the Falleen doing something that they didn't like. They're like, just change that, change a couple happy to glads. But they really let me just kind of have my head and do what I wanted. And that really, the only big pushback they gave me is the main character. I'd named her Loudon and gave her the nickname of Ren. Not knowing. I didn't know. And they came back and they're like, yeah, you gotta give her a different nickname. It's like, okay. They're like, I didn't know. And I didn't sign an NDA. They did tell me don't say anything because we haven't even announced Battlefront the video game yet, much less the tie-in novel, much less your tie-in short story. So I didn't have to sign anything, but kind of like what Alex said, I knew that if I said, like, if I ran around yelling, I'm writing Star Wars, that I would probably never get hired by anybody ever again. So but it was awesome. It was a lot of fun. And I remember I friended Alexander Freed on Twitter, and it was just one of those, like, he added me back and we both just kind of did the little head nod at each other. We can't talk about things, but we're now Twitter friends. Anyways, it was amazing, and that hopefully answered your question.
Definitely.
That's always a perpetual problem, is when you come up with something really cool and then you find out you can't do it for reasons you could not possibly have known about, which is especially a problem if you're working on something that's in production.
Yeah, the cool part is I did a Star Wars story and they wouldn't let me call my character Ren. What's up with that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I when I first pitched, I did a Sleepy Hollow novel based on the TV show from a few years back, and I had something involving a magic sword, and they said, "Great, we love it. Can't be a magic sword." Turns out there was a magic sword in season 2. I didn't know, so I changed it to something else. You always have to have backup plans, I guess is what it boils down to, just in case, because you never know what they're going to reject for some odd reason that you couldn't have predicted.
I mean, it was an easy change. Her name was Loudon. So instead of calling her Ren, I just called her Lau.
Yeah.
It was easy.
And of course, sometimes they let you do something and then they make you reverse it. Like Gene was saying, you kill somebody and then you have to bring them back. This happens all the time. You get used to it.
So Janine, since you had that unique position of going in just as they shifted everything from canon to legends, was there anything, I mean, we see what The Mandalorian is doing right now, bringing things back over into canon. Is there anything you really wanted to do to bring back in, or did you try?
So really wasn't that kind of a story. I don't know how much, I don't know what everybody's read as far as the EU, but I was a diehard. I read every page written, like, religiously. And it was primarily about Jedis and their offspring, and the big three, and kind of any of their any offshoots from them. This was a story about your average, for lack of a better term, your non-force wielding soldier, sailor, airman, your military members. Like, the closest thing would have been like Tales of the Bounty Hunter or any of the short stories anthologies that Star Wars did, but this was still different. It was Alexander Freed's Battlefront novel is very gritty, and there are no force wielders in it at all, and I don't think there's a single character in there from the films. It's about your everyday average person, and that was the intent of this story. So that's a long way of saying no. I did ask them if I needed to call things Nerf stakes or if I could just call them stakes. And they laughed. They're like, you can just call them stakes. And so there are things from the EU that I would love to see come back in canon. But I was never one of the folks who got really upset about the EU being turned into legends, because in my opinion, it doesn't make, those books are always going to be there. I still have them. I still read them. The X-Wing ones I've completely worn them out. I've read them so many times. Just because it's no longer canon doesn't mean it goes away. It's just, in my opinion, it's just created a bigger universe, a different universe, and you can switch back and forth and create your own headcanon, because let's face it, that's what we all do anyway. Anyway.
All right.
I have to put in something here that just because the discussions of canon always make my head explode. And I particularly get tired of people using it as an excuse to dismiss the tie-in fiction. Well, it's not canon, so why should I care? You know what else isn't canon? The Marvel Cinematic Universe is not canon. but people still go see those movies.
I don't
In,
know,
like,
man.
large
Maybe
quantities.
it's like currency where like, if you believe in the power of it enough, it actually.
So I think that's
the
one
canon of Marvel
Right?
Comics
Like,
is the
if you
comics.
clap hard enough, then Thor Ragnarok is real.
There it is.
Yes.
There it is.
But that's the other thing. Why do people stress about what's real in a fictional construct?
Exactly. And
You know?
it doesn't, I think so I know like what Star Wars decided with the story group and when Disney bought it out, and the reason they made everything Legends is because they wanted to create a universe where everything in it was canon and officially sanctioned. So even the little mini like 3-minute YouTube clips are canon. Anything that's in a comic book is canon. My silly little, well, it wasn't silly, but to me, not silly. My little short story, canon. The Last Jedi, canon. Like it's all, and their view was that it was all going to be equal. And so people can get in a kerfuffle, but again, that doesn't take Legends away. And to Keith's point, it doesn't make the Marvel films less enjoyable than the comics, which reboot themselves every 10 years anyway.
I mean, that's an
Right.
argument for the multiverse, right? Like I can do anything I want in the Clue books because every 10 years Hasbro is like, and now Professor Plum is a .com millionaire, whatever. Like,
The Clueniverse.
So
I remember .com millionaires.
It just allows, I think it just allows, honestly, it allows a fresh crop of folks because in 20 years, it's going to, or in 10 years, or whenever they decide to reboot any of these properties, a younger group of writers with different life experiences, they're going to come in and they're going to get to play and have fun in whatever sandboxes we've all been having fun in without having to, to Alex's original point, having to rehash a story that's been told 1,000 times that they have to try to confine and configure their way into, because hopefully it'll be brand new for them, or there'll be a new era or area that hasn't been explored.
All right. I think this is a perfect place to end on a perfect point. So let's go ahead and go around the room one more time so that everyone can let us know where to find you on the internet. We'll start with you, Jean.
I'm easy. It's just jeanrabe.com.
All right, perfect. Diana?
just dianapeterfreund.com, and if you Google whatever spelling that you managed to come up with, you'll find me. It's not that hard.
All right, perfect. Chris?
Since I have a super common name, I had to get imaginative with my website. So it's Jax Books with an X, Jax Books. I even got a vanity plate. I was so proud. And I had a fan, actually a vanity plate for my car that said Jax Books. A fan said, "Hey, Chris Jackson." I was like, "What?" So jaxbooks.com, that's me.
All right, Clay, Susan?
We're at clayandsusangriffith.com, and you can find us on Twitter and on Facebook at the usuals.
All right, perfect. Keith?
DeCandido.net, my last name.net, which is a spectacularly primitive website right now that looks like it was designed by somebody who learned HTML in 1996, because I learned HTML in 1996. I'm in the process of making it better. I've hired somebody who's making it better, but for now, it's a link dump. It brings you to the ordering links for my most recent books and all the different places to find me.
Is it like a GeoCities website?
It's not quite that bad, but close. Nothing sparkles or blinks at the very least. But it links to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Wikipedia, Tor.com, where I do a lot of pop culture writing, my YouTube channel where I've been reading my short fiction, and a bunch of other stuff. So if you go there, you can find me.
All right.
I'm very easy to cyberstalk.
All right. Alex?
You can find me on Twitter at AlexRWhite, and you can find my website, alexrwhite.com. And I had to do that because there are a lot of Alex Whites in the world, and I lost the domain the first time by accident. So I really regret that bad move from 2005. But anyway, yeah, and then find me on bookshelves next February with Alien Into Charybdis.
Perfect. Janine?
I am at JanineKSpendlove.com or JanineSpendlove.com. It all routes to the same place. I don't think it's been updated in years, though, to be honest. If you really want to get a hold of me, find me on Instagram, sometimes Facebook. I have a Twitter, but I don't like using it. So mostly Instagram, but all Janine Spendlove or Janine K. Spendlove, the handle. So, and if you go to my Instagram, it's never about writing because everything I write for the last couple of years has all been scholarly stuff, scholarly nonfiction stuff that I find fascinating, but is probably pretty boring to the majority of folks out there. And so it's mostly just pictures of my outfits and my dogs. So if you want to see cute puppies, good, there you go.
Who doesn't want to see cute puppies?
But my stuff's all on Amazon and yeah, so or your local bookseller maybe can probably order it for you too.
Perfect. And finally, Aaron.
You can find me at Griffin Rose, GRYPHONROSE.com, and also at crazy8press.com since I'm one of the founding members. And on Twitter and I believe on Facebook as well, it's Griffin Rose.
All right, perfect. Again, I want to thank everyone for coming and everyone for watching. See you guys next time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.